Hello everyone, this is Kathy Farrell, National Educator with RNK Distributing, and I am bringing you the January 2017 Project of the Month. In this month's project, first of all, be sure that you download your materials from the myfloriani.club. This month's free design is the script letter V from the Antique Script Collection. You see it right here. It's wonderful. And you will need to make sure that you have your project handout and that you print it off. That will help you to complete the project. In this month's lesson, we're going to, number one, use artwork to define a workspace. This is a technique that I use quite frequently in my software, and I hope that you'll enjoy the concept behind it. Number two, we're going to add guidelines. We haven't done this before, but the guidelines are really helpful in the software to help you when you're laying things out. Number three, we are going to create an applique from an artwork shape. I do believe we have done this before several months ago. Last summer we did an apron, and it was all applique in the apron, and that was one of the concepts in there, was to do this. But we're going to do that again, revisit it. We will update that applique. You can bring in any applique and update it, or any applique that you create, you can update. And then we'll also recolor a design with specific colors, and that's searching for a specific color of thread in the software. The materials that you need for this month, of course, your Floriani Total Control U software, your Floriani Free Project of the Month design, your January 2017, and when you download the January free monthly designs, this automatically installs, and in that will be your project handout with this detailed supply list. And so this month what you're going to see is Floriani Dreamweave Ultra, which is a very common product in the projects that I put together. You'll need your Floriani embroidery needles, a 7511. And then also we're going to be doing some sewing this month because we're creating a pillow. And so you'll need a universal needle. Floriani Perfect Stick Tearaway Stabilizer. This is a project that is actually going to fit in the small hoop of your embroidery machine. So you could probably get by with a 12-inch roll of that Perfect Stick Stabilizer. Your Floriani Template Tearaway, and you will need at least 4 sheets for the project as given. Floriani embroidery thread, select some fabric, and then you choose the thread colors that you'd like. Floriani embroidery thread to match the burlap. We're going to be working with burlap in this project, and so you'll need some thread that will match that, or you can use some clear thread. And then Floriani water soluble topping. Other items that you're going to need this month, you will need fabric, and I think a half a yard. I did a 14 by 14 pillow form, and a half a yard is more than enough fabric for that. You will also need burlap, and you can get by with a 1/4 of a yard of burlap. You will need a pillow form, and as I said, the pillow that I made, I used a 14 by 14 form. I think that's pretty much the smallest that they come in. You may be able to find a smaller one. I know that they come larger. So pick your pillow form, and then based on the form that you choose, you can make a larger pillow or a smaller pillow or even an oblong pillow. This is entirely customizable. You will need a zipper to match the fabric. I put a zipper into my pillow to enable me to take the cover off and on. You could also do an envelope pillow or something like that. That's entirely up to you. We need the zipper to match the fabric, so I did put a zipper in. I like to do zippers in my pillow. It just makes it easy for me to switch them in and out. You will need decorative trim, and that's as desired. This is entirely up to you. In the picture shown, I found a crystal heart belt buckle and then some nice ribbon, and I used that to embellish my pillow. This is entirely something that you may choose. You will need some kind of a fabric marker. I recommend Fabrico fabric markers. You can get these. They're very, very popular and very common. I do believe that they're carried at some of the big box stores. You will need either a red or a maroon, or you can even use paint. You could use acrylic paint for this fabric. But we're going to use these. This is kind of a multi-dimensional project in that we're going to have applique. we're going to have embroidery, and we're going to actually paint on the burlap fabric, and it gives you a really nice textured effect. And then you're going to prepare your fabric. You're going to fuse your Dreamweave Ultra directly to the fabric, and then with the burlap, what I would recommend that you do is straighten the burlap. Straighten the grain of the burlap, press it in place so that you can cut it, and when you cut it, the weave of the burlap is fairly straight. And if you've ever worked with burlap, you know what I'm talking about. It can get a little wonky and bend out of shape, and so you will need to kind of stretch that and press it into place. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our software lesson. I have my FTC-U software open, and I have a new document, blank document. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add an artwork rectangle. So we come up under our artwork shapes, we select the rectangle shape, and we come down in here and we click and drag to draw a rectangle. Don't worry about the size. We move over to the Transform tab, and on the Transform tab, deselect Maintain Aspect Ratio. We're going to work with my pillow form is 14 by 14. I'm going to enter in the dimensions 12 by 12 as my workspace. That kind of accommodates the natural roundedness of the pillow, and that's just a personal thing. I'm going to go ahead and click on Apply. I come over here, I zoom to fit so that I can see my workspace. Now we're going to add the guidelines. To add the guidelines, when you come up, and the guidelines do not affect your design at all. They are only for the purpose of visually giving you a reference point. It's almost like the grid, only the grid is predefined. The guidelines, you as a user, place the guidelines where you want them. So to add a guideline, we're going to come up and I'm going to click right there on the ruler. So I left click, I'm holding my mouse down, and then as I drag down, this dotted line comes with it, and that is a guideline. I'm going to drag down to the 0, and I'm looking over here on my ruler, and I'm going to drop it right there on the 0. Okay, that is the 0 axis. The next thing we're going to do, that's a horizontal guideline. Let's add a vertical one. So we're going to left click over here, drag right there, and come over and add a vertical guideline. That's how easy it is. You can continue to add additional guidelines and to get rid of them or to move them. I just reselect that. I can drag it off. If I wanted to move one of these, I could just click on it and drag it. As I said, these guidelines have nothing to do with the design. They don't control anything. They're just for the purpose of giving you a visual axis. So the next thing I'll do, I'm going to make sure that my rectangle is selected. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to center it. So now that's -6 plus 6, -6 plus 6. So it's centered right here in the center of my screen. And I've got my guidelines. So I have 4 quadrants representing the pillow form that I'm going to be creating. So as I said, guidelines have nothing to do with the design. They are for visual representation only. So there's the guidelines. Next, we're going to bring in the free design for this month. So I'm on my library tab. I'm going to come over to the panel. I'm going to find free FTC-U projects and expand it. I'm going to come down into the January and expand it and select January of 2017. Now I'm going to come over to my designs panel and I'm going to left click and bring into this lower quadrant over here that antique V shape. And I can go ahead and align that as necessary. Once we have that in the design, we're going to recolor it and we're going to look for a specific thread color. The first thing you want to make sure of is that you have your Floriani Poly thread chart selected. This is not included in your handout, but this is something you'll want to do. And we've worked with thread charts in other lessons. So make sure that you have that thread chart selected. I'm going to then click on the thread color search. I left click. I then can type in a color. So if I wanted to search by red, I would type in red, and you'll see that as I start entering that, it's going to filter all of the colors that begin with that. You don't have to filter it necessarily by thread color name. On that thread color, let me just drag this up so that you can see it. We can also look for a specific number so that I can pre-select my thread colors. So maybe I've got my fabric and I select threads that match the fabric, and I can take the number on that thread and type in the number. So for instance, the color that I'm using in here is a poly 700 red. So I could either go with red, R-E-D, and it will take me over to all the reds, or I can type in here the number 700. So you can search by color or you can search by name. I think that's a wonderful feature in there. And then make sure that you have that selected. And now I've updated the color. Let's go to the second motif in there, and the color 2, it's called Rose Cerise. And I think one of the things you'll find is that Floriani threads don't have a color on them, even though every thread has an individual and unique name to it. But when we look at our threads, we are always looking at them by number. So it's just really nice to know that you can search not just by name, but you can also find a specific color in there and let your software do the work for you. I've turned on my pointer focus program for you so that you can better see my cursor. We're now going to add the heart artwork and convert it to applique. Let's come up and left click on our custom shapes tool. In the custom shapes tool, I'm going to scroll down, and you're looking for, and these are alphabetized, we're looking for this shape Heart 004. So select that and bring that into your software. Now I'm going to look at my size of my V, and when I come over, I can look down here and let's just look at the size of that real quick so we have a good idea. The width is 3.24 inches and the height is 3.5 inches. And so I'm going to kind of keep that in the back of my head as I go through and add the rest of my design, because I want everything to have a good perspective. I select that heart. I go to my transform tab, and I'm going to change the size of the heart. I want it to be 3.5 in width, which is great, but I also want it to be 3.5 in height. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in the number 3.5. Notice that I did not have that box for maintain aspect ratio selected. If I had that selected when I updated the height, it would have also updated the width. I've got my heart to convert it into applique. It's as easy as when you bring in any artwork, your Stitch Effects toolbar down here becomes active. And right here, this tool that, as Kathy Quinn would call it, the green bush, is your applique tool. So to convert this to applique, all I need to do with any artwork in there is come in, left click, and I've now made applique. I'm going to drag that to 45 degrees because I want it at a diagonal. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the cover stitch in it. So by default, when you bring in machine applique, it covers it up. The finishing stitch is a satin stitch. I'm going to select the drop down in the properties box under applique and change it to motif stitch. And these are all of the motif stitches, and these are a lot of fun to use because when you are creating applique, I think machine applique has a predefined look when it is covered with the satin stitch. And I think you can really alter the look of machine applique by using these various decorative stitches that you have access to. So as you scroll down in there, and I would encourage you, you do not have to do the applique stitch that I used, but I'm going to go down and I'm looking for F, and I used the F key on my keyboard, and I'm looking for F, and we're looking for F104. So it's almost to the bottom. There it is, F104. So I select that and I click on apply. Now, if you want to zoom into that, let me zoom into selection. And let's just deselect that and turn on 3D. And so you'll see you've got these cute little hearts in there. This is entirely up to you. If you would like to alter the size of those hearts, maybe the size of the stitch, you certainly have the options to do that in your software. Remember, FTC-U, ultimate control. You have the control to do any of these changes that you want. And I definitely encourage you to look at that. So the default motif size in there is a 3. Maybe I want to make it a 5. So I encourage you, play around with this and see the effect that you get with your design. I just left it as the default in there at this motif size of 5 millimeters. And that's all I did with my applique design. The last thing that we're going to do is let's go ahead and zoom to fit so we can see all of our work so far. And we're going to add the letter L and the letter E. So you'll see now that it spells L-O, the heart is the O, V, and E. We're going to use our TrueType artwork. We're going to bring in, right in this box, I'm going to type a capital L space and a capital E. It doesn't really make a difference there. We're going to select a font, so I'm going to click on this. TrueType fonts are the fonts that are installed on your computer. We're going to use, once again, I'm telling you how I did the project. I kept it very basic. You have the option of customizing this project for you, and I encourage you to do that. I'm going to use the Arial font. I selected that font specifically because it is installed on every Windows computer. If I had gotten into some of these other custom fonts that I have, I encourage you to go back and look at some of the previous lessons. I believe it was in November of 2017. I actually, as a part of the lesson, included how you can download a font and install it into your computer. And so any of your fonts on your computer can be used for this. So you can get really creative. But we're going to use Arial, which is what I used. I selected Arial, I selected bold, and then I came down and I did update the size in here, and I think I made it a 20 and said OK. And then I select OK again. When you bring in that artwork, it comes in, it's actually 2 separate objects, and it is artwork. We're going to resize each of these pieces of artwork. We're going to come back to the Transform tab. I'm going to select the Maintain Aspect Ratio, and I'm going to enter in my height of, if you remember what we said, 3.5 inches. Okay. And if I wanted to change that to red, I could. And this is artwork. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing with my E. So maintain aspect ratio. My height is 3.5. I'm going to make that E there. And that is pretty much it for this lesson. Now, you've got a couple of options here, and I'm just going to throw them out to you as a part of the lesson. I printed the L and the E on to template tearaway. I cut them out. I used these as stencils and then painted the inside of them. Other options. Do you have access to one of the digital cutting machines, a Scan and Cut or a Cameo or something like that? If you do, you could export this as artwork and you could cut it in some of your various materials, in vinyl or something like that, heat transfer vinyl, and you could press that on there. I thought about doing that, but I didn't want to, I decided on this one, I'm just going to keep it simple and we're just going to paint it. So that's how I went about doing the project. Now, as I said, in the software, you're using this for the visual layout. So you may want to, when I got done, I kind of wished that maybe I had made all of my shapes just a little bit larger. So you may alter the project based on what your needs are. This isn't in the lesson, but just for the purpose of laying these out, I went ahead and I'm selecting I've got my control key down. I'm going to select the heart and the L, and I'm going to line them up. And so I come up under my tools here. I'm going to select this. I'm going to align them on the bottom. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the V. I've got my control down. I've got the V and the E. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line those on the bottom. Now, I want my V and my L to be aligned, and so I'm going to align them up this way. And let's do the same thing with the heart and the E. Okay, as I said, this is not included in the handout specifically, but this is just one of those things that I can demonstrate for you in the lesson to show you additional tools and features that you can use as you're going through this visual process of creating a project. So I've got those all laid out in there. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'm going to save as. I'm going to put it in a folder or on there, and I'm going to save this as my heart script WAF file. And then if I want to come back and make additional changes to it, or maybe I do want to cut these letters out, I have the master design so that I can go back and make changes and fixes to that at that time. So I recommend save it right now. The last thing that we're going to do in the project, so we've got this all laid out, we've got it sized. We're going to create 4 separate files for the purpose of printing. There's a reason for this. I'm going to come under File and I'm going to go to Print Preview. And do you see what happens is that it sees it as one unique file, and here's my center marking in there. And because I need to print this on Template Tearaway, I need to have each of these designs individually separated out so that I've got an accurate center marking for that. So let's go ahead and close here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to select the V. Now there's multiple ways to select it. I could use my panel over here, my sequence view panel, and select them over here. But I find it much easier to just select this design. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to cut that out of this document. I'm going to open up a new piece of paper. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste this. I'm going to save this, File, Save, and I'm going to save this as the V. Okay, that's fine. I'm also, because I'm going to stitch this is a stitch file, I also need to do a file, I need to do a save as, and I need to convert it here to my machine format, which is an EXP. So I'm going to go EXP, I'm going to give it the name V, I'm going to save that to my flash drive in preparation for stitching the file out. I'm going to print this. So now let's go back down and do a file. I'm going to go to my print setup here. Excuse me. I'm going to go File and I'm going to come down into Print Preview. It opens up into my settings here, and I'm going to click on this settings, and I want you to do this, and I want you to verify your print settings. Number 1, make sure that you have this checked for print actual size. Because we're going to print on Template Tearaway and we're going to use this for the placement on that master fabric, printing at actual size is critical for that precise placement of the embroidery design. The print analysis is this down here on the bottom. Once you have your settings in place, then you're going to go ahead and say, okay. I always like to mention this in addition to your print setups here. Before you print on your Template Tearaway, double check your print setup, or maybe even print on a piece of paper ahead of time. The print setup, these are your actual printer settings. So based on the printer that you are using in wherever you're printing, this is going to pop up. So my default printer is a Canon, and my printer has specific properties. And I always like to have people and to tell you, double check your settings in there, because you can change the effect that you get by this, and your printer settings override the settings of your software. And one of the critical ones, I don't know where it is on your particular print settings, but in my print settings, I've got this screen right here that says Fit to Page. If I were to come into my printer settings and select that, if this design were larger than what would fit on an actual piece of paper, it would shrink the design, even though I have in my printer settings of the software to print actual size. So I always like to point that out. I don't want anybody to ever miss that and then print on your template tearaway, which breaks my heart when I print on template tearaway and I've printed incorrectly or it's the wrong size and I've just ruined a piece of template tearaway. So just double check those before you get ready to print. Once you're done, go ahead and print this onto your template tearaway. Print each of your designs separately. And what I mean is that you're going to print your applique feature, the L feature, and the E feature. Print each of those on a separate piece of template tearaway. This is not to waste template tearaway, but we're going to do very precise placement. We're going to use these, we're going to place them on one piece of burlap. And what becomes critical for you when we do this are your center hash markings. So in order to achieve those and have those in the correct placement, print each design separately. Let's look at how we're going to wrap up this project. First of all, I also, as a part of every month's project of the month, like to remind people of where the project handout is. You get a free handout that illustrates the instructions. It's more step by step, and it is located in your computer. So you're going to navigate to your C drive. So you're just going to double click on that and look for the folder titled Floriani. Open that up. Inside that folder is a subfolder titled Designs. Within the Designs folder, when you open that up, that's where your free projects and your free designs install. Find the folder that says Free FTC-U Projects, double click on that or open that up. Find your January folder and double click on that to open it up and find January 2017. When you open up that folder, you'll see the designs that come with it, and you'll also see the handout. And so it's a PDF file. You're going to open that up, and then you can print it off. The first thing we're going to do when we get ready to embroider is we're going to embroider the reverse applique. If you read through the handout, I talk about what reverse applique is. And so in reverse applique, we're going to remove fabric. So we create multiple layers of fabric and we'll remove that. We stitch the top and then we cut it away. Prepare your main fabric. Your main fabric is going to be the fabric for your pillow. Whatever pillow form you're using, and I will use the example of mine, which was 14 by 14, you're going to cut your main fabric, and I would make it at least 16 by 16. You might want to make it a little bigger. Remember that as we embroider on here, the fabric is going to distort and shrink somewhat, just a little bit. But 16 by 16, because we're going to also prepare our fabric with Dreamweave Ultra, is more than large enough for this project. You won't have any issues with it. I always use Dreamweave Ultra on my main fabric. This is going to be a pillow. You will love the effect that you get by adding your Dreamweave Ultra to the back of that fabric. It is a fabric prep. What it does is it increases the thread count. It ensures no wrinkles. And because this is going to be a throw pillow and it's going to sit out for decoration, I want to take that moment to add the Dreamweave Ultra in there. I love the effect that I get with it. So I always use Dreamweave Ultra on my fabric. I recommend that you prep the burlap also. And what I mean by that is press it. And as you press it, I used a lot of steam, and I also straightened the grain of the burlap. And depending on the burlap that you're using, it's a very coarse texture in there. I wanted it to be, and when I'm talking about straightening the grain, because we're going to fray this at the end. So if you, as straight as you can get this, it will help if you do that ahead of time. Once you have straightened that and pressed it, take it, cut it, and mark it with your chalk marker. I tried to use a friction pen. That's kind of my default go-to pen. But I found that because of the texture of the coarseness of the burlap, it didn't mark very well. So I reverted back to a chalk marker. Use what works for you. And I first of all marked the center of the burlap. And then you'll see I also used a ruler to lay out the individual components of this. Once you have everything in place, remove the backing from your design templates and stick them down. So even though I laid this out, this is not my template. I just printed this on a piece of paper. These are the actual templates. And so I've got those stuck in place, and you're just going to leave them there. But I wanted to make sure that I had everything laid out. Then I'm going to take my burlap and just lay it on top of the main fabric, and I pinned it in place. I did pin basting. You can baste with a needle or something, but I found that pin basting worked quite well. Now I'm ready to embroider the design. I hooped a piece of Floriani Perfect Stick Tearaway Stabilizer. You will love this. This is a small hoop friendly project. Even though the finished project is going to be large, 15 by 15 inches, we are sewing individual components. We're working on individual areas of the design. So the beauty of it is that it allows us to use a small hoop. I like to use the grid that matches my hoop. I've got a clear plastic grid that just helps me line things up. Notice this is just something that I like to do. This is embroidery perfection tape. I put the tape directly onto the hoop. I put the tape directly onto that clear plastic grid, and I tape the grid onto the fabric, and it holds it in place as I go through the process of hooping the fabric and sticking it down. This is just something that I started doing. It was like, boy, I wish that grid were a little bit tacky. Hey, I can use some embroidery perfection tape. Align the design using the mark on the template. Before you embroider, remember to remove your template tearaway. Now this is kind of sticky, and the nature of the burlap is that it makes it a little easier to remove, but be very careful when you're removing it to not shift your fabric in there, because this is very precarious. This is pinned in place. So just a little note, you can do it. Stitch the first color. Once you have the first color stitched, and that is a tack down stitch for your fabric, in reverse applique, we're going to cut away the inside of the applique design. So we're going to remove the burlap from the inside of this applique. You'll see it right here once I've got all of the burlap cut away. So trim it, use your little scissors. We'll do a little trim once we get done. But cut away the inside of the applique here, and you will reveal the inside color. Also, just a quick note, notice I used a basting feature in there, so you may want to go ahead and do that. I didn't include it in the instructions, but feel free to do that. I like to use a little basting feature when I'm not hooping. Once you've trimmed away the burlap, return the hoop to your machine and finish color 2, which is another straight stitch, and then color 3, which was the decorative stitch that covers over the edge of the burlap here. I've got that done. I'm ready to embroider the V. Okay, so I moved to the section of the pillow that I'm going to do the V with, and I did not include pictures of that, but with the V, we're going to hoop it using the same steps as the heart. Use Floriani Perfect Stick Stabilizer in the hoop, align the fabric using your clear grid, center up the design, remove the template tearaway. So we're at this step right here. I've removed the template tearaway. Before I stitch the actual design, I'm going to add topping. And this is really important for the design. If you don't add topping, what's going to happen is that you're not going to be able to see the design on top of the burlap. It's going to kind of sink down inside there. So make sure with this project that you use topping. I chose to use Floriani water-soluble topping. I'm not going to wash the pillow, and when I got done, I could steam the excess topping away. Heat and gum would work. I chose to use Floriani water-soluble topping. Make sure that you add topping and then embroider to the design as usual. Now we're ready to add the L and the E. This is a multi-dimensional project. So we've got embroidery on there. We're going to paint the burlap. And I had this idea a couple of months ago as I was working on a project. And I thought, well, you know what? I could use template tearaway as a stencil. And that's how this project was born. This is why you want to print the L and the E. So these are printed. I cut around the outside here. And this is the marking that becomes really, really important. There's my center mark right there. Cut away the inside of the design, and what I used is this beautiful surgical seam ripper. It's by Floriani, and it actually, we don't sell it individually. It came in one of the scissor kits. It came in the 10-year anniversary kit. So my surgical seam ripper, I very carefully cut along the lines of the L. This I took, and then I'm going to put that down on the pillow. Repeat this for the E stencil. Next, I'm going to paint directly on top of the burlap. So now you can see my stencil right around the outside. I chose to use what they're called Fabrico fabric markers. I love these markers. You can pick them up at the big box store. They don't cost a lot of money. The reason why I like these markers is, first of all, they come with two tips on there. So it has a fine tip and it has a brush tip. I use the brush tip. It's for large areas. But what I love about these markers is that when you use them, they actually are water soluble. So if you made a mistake, you could just use a little water to wash away the ink. But once you touch your iron on here, it heat sets the ink and the ink becomes permanent. So they're cost effective. They're easy to use. I actually have one in every color, and I just keep them in my embroidery room. This is another little tip. If you've ever made a mistake in embroidery design and maybe you have some white threads showing through your bobbin threads or something, you could take one of these markers and just cover up the design. So these really are a nice tool to have in your embroidery room. I've painted the L and the E. I'm all done with that, and you'll see in the next picture, once you remove the template tearaway off the outside, you've got these beautiful clean lines. And then I just pressed it, and now it's permanent in there. So this is all ready to go. I'm ready to move on to the construction of the pillow. I'm going to trim the fabric down. So this is before I've trimmed it. I've got my rotary cutter. I'm going to trim it down to, I've got a 14 by 14 pillow form. If you remember, I cut my fabric 16 by 16. So I trimmed off about 1 inch. So I press this in place nice and neat, get out the center markings there, and trim it down. Before I construct the pillow, you're going to mark around the perimeter here. So I've got it cut, and then I marked it. And I'm going to stitch along that marking. So I measured in 1 inch from the outside perimeter after I trimmed it. So this is 15 by 15. I measured in 1 inch and I marked it. I went over to my machine, and you're going to use a matching thread or a clear monofilament thread and stitch on that mark. And this becomes important for the next step. We're going to fray the outside of the pillow. So once I've stitched that, I fold the burlap in and I tape it in place on the inside here. So this is going to be the actual pillow size. I've taped in the burlap because the last step is to get that frayed effect. So that's what we've done. So by stitching that down and holding it in place, we're now ready to construct the pillow. We're going to add a zipper. Now, how you put your pillow together is entirely up to you. You can create this and slip stitch it on a pillow. I use a pillow form, and I like to swap out the covers that I make because I like to make pillow covers. They're fast, they're easy, they're a lot of fun. Do you want an envelope or a zipper? This is an easy project to put a zipper into. Pillows are easy. They're very, very forgiving. So I chose to add a zipper. Find a zipper that matches. I used a 14-inch zipper. You're going to just straight stitch this in place. I come from the garment world. Zippers used to cause me to break out in a cold sweat. But I love zippers in pillows because you don't have to worry about the placement of it. So you're just going to line up the zipper, use a straight stitch, stitch along the seam here, and then you're going to stitch this side to the other side of your pillow. Once you've got that zipper in place, fold it together and sew the side seams. I like to sew the 2 side seams first and then the closing seam. and then you're going to turn it right side out. Once you have it turned right side out, I pressed it, and then you're going to pull away the burlap threads to create this fringe effect. Now remember, we did that straight stitch, and I think if you look closely, you can see the seam right there. Pull the threads away to create that fringe effect. The last thing is to trim it. I found this really cute crystal belt buckle. I added a piece of ribbon trim, and there you go, finished pillow. I hope that you'll remember that if you create this project, please post it on the Floriani embroidery page on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, you can post the picture on Instagram, and if you add @Casey-Farrell, I'll be able to see that. You can tweet it. We use hashtags to identify it, so this is hashtag January project and always a hashtag Floriani embroidery. If you have questions about the project, yes, email me. It's kathyf@rnkdistributing.com. Please come back next month. In February, we're going to be digitizing over a backdrop image. So until then, this is Kathy Farrell. Thank you.